So, the INEC chairman at Chatham House gave the assurance that electronic transmission of results was going to happen. So all those assurances were there. But surprisingly, on the day of the presidential election, after the election have commenced throughout the country, when elections were being concluded in some areas, polling unit officers, which were ad hoc staff of INEC, they have used beavers to accredit earlier in the day. And they attempted to, when they snapped the results, they wanted to upload to IREF, and it did not work. There were several polling unit officers that made videos of them. They showed the system trying to upload the results. It didn't work. There were 3 elections that took place that day. The presidential election, the election into the Senate and House of Representatives. The funny thing was that it worked for the Senate, House of Rep. For the presidential election, it did not work. So, the question was, why would a system that works in off-cycle elections not work in the general elections? Before the general elections in February, months before, in October, November, there were rumors that INEC were not going to use the IREF server. INEC denied. On the day of the election, the IREF server, which is INEC result viewing portal, did not work. So those rumors were true. So the question is, did INEC know that the server was not going to work? And they wanted us to believe that it will work, so that it should be a surprise. Or they actually thought that it was going to work, and on that day of the election, things went bad. I think some people in INEC knew. Because if it was just on the day of the election, and genuine, sincere officials were overseeing that election, and they saw that a crucial part, a critical part of that election was not happening because of a technical glitch. If that was the case, they would have cancelled that election and postponed it to such a time when that glitch would be fixed. But they didn't do that. INEC did not release any statement for close to 48 hours about what happened with that technical glitch. They did not. They waited for 48 hours and they gave a nebulous, very non-specific term, technical glitch, in a press statement. While they were collecting results in Abuja, they refused to answer questions from opposing parties delegates, opposition party delegates, as to why INEC IREF server was not working. So if it was something that just happened, they would have corrected it. They would have come out and made statements, just like JAMB is doing now. They would have made statements, oh, this happened, okay, this is what we are going to do. They did not. There was silence for 48 hours from INEC. That suggests complicity. Someone knew what was going on and they just kept quiet about it. And the reason why they sold us a dummy, they made us believe that the INEC RF server would work, in my opinion, the reason they did that, they gave us all those assurances, was that to avoid litigation. It was meant to be a surprise on the day of the election. When you are going to a contest, the one strategy is surprise. I think those who planned that were very smart. I respect their genius, even if it's evil genius. They knew that the IRF server was not going to work on the day of the election. They knew months before, staff that worked at the ICT department in Abuja, in INEC ICT department in Abuja, were transferred, and they brought in new people. Rumors went out that this was going to happen. They knew. But INEC leadership came out reassuring people. They sent out emissaries to newspapers and to say that was not the case, that the IRF will work. You know why? Because they feared litigation. If the opposition parties knew and they were sure that the IRF server was not going to be used, they would have gone to court. They would have gotten an order mandating INEC to implement its regulations. They would have gone to court, and possibly they would have gotten that order because it was under a different government that were not really too in favor of the incoming candidate of the APC. So opposition parties could have gotten an order mandating INEC to use that INEC server. And on the day of that election, with that court order in hand, INEC would not have tried it. But there was no order of court. Some months before, the Senate, some senators were making attempts to change the Electoral Act so that to remove any suggestion that there will be electronic transmission. You understand? But when that didn't work, they just kept quiet. Because some of them knew there was another strategy in play, which was there was going to be a glitch. The server was not going to work. And you know why? Because some months before, server was what made APC to lose in Osun State, where the relative of the APC candidate lost, where an incumbent governor lost. They knew if Beavers worked, IRF server worked, the same thing was going to happen in the presidential election. The ruling party would likely lose. So the IRF server was not going to work. But it's meant to be a surprise. People must not know that. So they have to go all out to Chatham House, to everywhere, convince people that it was going to work. So that everybody will have that false hope. Before that election, some investigative journalists, David Udeyin and journalists like, before the election, investigative journalists like David Udeyin and journalists like Hussein Rufai, they kept asking about INEC. Will INEC this thing work? Will the server work? And all of that. David Udeyin specifically kept mentioning INEC. Even with the popularity of opposition candidates like Peter Obi and others, the obedient movement and others, some keen observers said it's going to come down to INEC. And at the end of the day, it came down to INEC. And one other thing that made me know that something was amiss was INEC, before the February 2023 general elections, was very vocal. INEC leadership were very vocal. They were giving press statements, they were giving, arranging press conferences, they were going to give lectures abroad, telling people that this thing's going to work. But on that day of the election, as that thing was unfolding, there was silence. 48 hours later, where they gave a very non-specific statement. And after the election, there's this silence. You hardly hear from the INEC leadership these days. Things have changed. It is not the INEC leadership we knew. that used to go about talking about the election and this, how it's going to be the most verifiable, most reliable, most this. There's this silence. Something went wrong, and it seems there's this complicity of silence where it's better just keep quiet, So I think it's unfair to compare what happened in INEC, technical glitch, and what's happening with JAMB. Yes, I blame JAMB. They didn't come out on time to tell us. The exams head April 24th. Report said April 25th, they discovered there was, the exam started April 24th. It started and continued April 25. April 25, they discovered there was a problem and there was systemic error. JAMB kept quiet until 2 weeks later when they released the results on May 9th, Friday, May 9th. Even when they released the results, they didn't say anything. They waited until there was a public outcry. But kudos to JAMB and its leadership. They came out eventually, apologized, and they said they were going to look into it. And they've made arrangement for receipt exams for those candidates who are affected. It showed leadership. It's quite different from what happened with INEC. I follow the 2020 elections out of sheer curiosity. I follow politics. I follow elections around the world, see what is happening. I follow the US elections and all that. Follow it on TV and social media. So I follow the 2023 elections. There are a lot of expectations in that 2023 elections. INEC leadership, they really sent out people. Mark Igini, who has left INEC, was used as a surrogate to go out and talk about these things. And it was quite disappointing to see how it all went. I don't think anybody knows what was the actual results of that election. Nobody knows because there was no way to know. Servers were switched off. Results were manipulated, to fit a certain outcome. Nobody knew. And it was quite disappointing. When you follow something and you have some respect for people in such leadership and, these things happen, it's quite disappointing. So that is why for the next election, I'm amused by the things I see, political parties, opposition parties, some say coalition, some say no coalition. I don't really have any much interest or any faith in 2027 because I saw what happened in 2023 and there was no explanation or anything. So it's still INEC that will conduct 2027 election. There's no changes to the Electoral Act mandating INEC to use electronic transmission of results. There's no assurance that there will be electronic transmission of results, which was the only panacea, the only thing that was going to thwart manipulation, election rigging and all that. INEC, there will likely be change of leadership in INEC. So, but INEC structure stays the same. Electoral commissioners, a number of national electoral commissioners that have political affiliations, people that were party members, which goes against the ethics and the rules. You appoint INEC national commissioners, people who are apolitical, people who are not party card-carrying members of political parties. But that's what we've seen. We've seen relations of politicians. So we see relatives of politicians being appointed as INEC commissioners. The other day there was someone, when election was conducted in Edo State, the person that was leading the INEC person in charge in the state is a close relation of a non-political figure. And when you see his face, when you hear his voice, you know they are related. So when you look at that, there's nothing that shows that INEC would change. In fact, it looks it's going to even get worse. So whether you form coalition or you don't form coalition, what's going to happen with INEC? If INEC stays the same, if there's no change in the electoral act and all that, so all you are doing is just exercising futility. As it is now, if there's no coalition, even with coalition, all the opposition parties coming together, the chances of them winning is like 30%. The chances of the ruling party winning is 70%, even with all the opposition coalition. But if there's no coalition, if Labour Party is on its own, PDP is on its own, SDP is on its own, NNPP, like they did in 2023, the chances of any opposition party winning is like 5 to 10%, or even non-existent. People forget that the last time an incumbent president was defeated in 2015, look at what happened then. There were coalitions. Opposition parties, different political parties, CPP, the ones from the Southwest, and all that, they came together, they formed a coalition. There was the new PDP. That is inside the PDP, which was the ruling party at that time. There was a breakaway part of the PDP that left, the core NPDP, the new PDP, that left and joined in the coalition party of APC. There was a coalition, there was momentum, and there were pressure on the Jonathan government from within the country and from outside. They made appeal to foreign governments like the US government and all that to ensure that the election was free and fair. To ensure that measures were put in place that the elections were conducted free and fair. So with those pressure and everything, and INEC had solid leadership at that time. That was how they were able to defeat the ruling party PDP at that time. And because the incumbent president at that time, Jonathan, was someone who told the path of honor and peace, and didn't want to force his way to have his way, the whole thing went the way they went. But look at it. Now there is no coalition of parties. There is no concerted pressure on the government, on INEC leadership to make any changes. There's none. There's no pressure, much pressure from within or from without. Instead of the opposition parties to coalesce together, they are divided. Even in the individual parties, they are divided. And now we see governors, senators and House of Reps defecting from opposition parties to the ruling party, APC. Governors are defecting. The governor of Delta State just defected to APC. And the funny thing I heard was PDP was saying that it doesn't matter. Those who want to defect should defect. That Peter Obi won third position even without having a sitting governor in Labour Party. All those things were quite ridiculous when I heard it. Because think back to 2015. You had opposition governors. You had governors of the ruling party leaving the ruling party to join opposition. They formed a coalition. They put concerted pressure on the ruling government at the time. So now, you don't want to form coalition, you want to form individual parties, you want to aspire to Maguire, and you think that anything is going to change. Let me tell you, the brains behind that 2023 elections are very smart. The brains behind that 2023 elections are smart. And they are in power now. At that time, they were not in power. They were aspiring to be in power, but they are now in power. You think that they are just going to sit by and you do your divided, disunited and divided, and they are going to just say, okay, come and win and take. No, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Those brains are at work. It's those brains that are ensuring that governors are defecting from opposition party to join the ruling party. From the senators are defecting, House of Rep are defecting. So where are you going to get the opposition? Nigeria are disillusioned. Nigerians have lost interest. They had a lot of optimism in 2015 when they voted for change. A new government came in and there was disappointment. After 8 years in power, disappointment. There's a lot of disillusionment. Even with the challenges that people have, a lot of disillusionment. People are disillusioned. People feel that their votes are not going to matter. Nothing's going to change. So even if people are upset about the condition of living, high cost of living and all that, they are also not interested because of how the election went in 2023. And because they know that the same outcome will take place in 2027. So where are they going to get the motivation from? Politicians are going to talk, activists will talk, they will aspire to Maguire, and at the end of the day, we know what will happen. The leadership structure is in INEC remains the same, even if you change the head. The people that plotted 2023 outcome, they are now in power and have federal might, behind them. So what led me to all this discussion is JAMB technical glitch. Please don't compare JAMB technical glitch to INEC, because INEC technical glitch rubs me the wrong way. That's why anytime I hear if it's always, they're different. I feel bad for JAMB. I think they could have done better, honestly, in addressing the issues earlier on and not allowing people to come out and cry and all the unnecessary consequences of that. And they're trying to correct their steps. I think is different. I don't think there's any regional or ethnic or religious angle to it. It's just an error that happened and they didn't make effort to correct it on time. They didn't come out on time to address it. You understand? They waited until they couldn't wait no more. You understand? So we all should do better.